One story we've been following closely this morning, the debate over cell phone encryption, with Apple making headlines as the company refuses to aid the FBI in the San Bernardino investigation. Apple arguing that hacking one of their iPhones in order to help the government would put millions of customers at risk. This week I sat down with former U.S. Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta. I asked him to weigh in on this issue.
I think it's dangerous to try to force a choice in this country between protecting our security and protecting our freedom. I think we can do both. That's been the history of our country, is the ability to do both. And so when it comes to a potential terrorist having the ability to communicate and conduct an attack on this country, I think there's got to be a way, using the courts, using a court order, to be able to go after that information. Now, it seems to me that the best course of action here would be to have both sides sit down and determine how best to accomplish this without jeopardizing the rights of privacy or the ability of Apple to do its thing. But I cannot believe that we ought to take a position that if a terrorist has the potential to conduct an attack on this country, we aren't going to do everything necessary in law enforcement to try to prevent that.
And you would think that Apple, as one of the great American companies, wants to do that and wants to help. But the issue really at stake is, does it make the country more vulnerable, not only to the bad actors within America, but also to the bad actors in China, in Russia? So, I mean, don't you think they have sat down already to talk this out, to see if something can be done?
Well, it sounds like they've tried to sit down, but they haven't made a lot of progress in coming to an approach here. We have to find a way to be able to get this done. And I believe, at least in my own experience, that there are ways to do this that at the same time can protect their competitive interests, their interest in the business that they're running, but at the same time provide the information necessary to law enforcement in order to protect this country. I think we all have to ask ourselves this question. If America is attacked by terrorists, and for some reason law enforcement was not able to get access to information that would have prevented that attack, the American people are going to ask the question, how did we let that happen?
Right.
And so for that reason, it makes sense for both sides to sit down and work this out.
For sure. But then the follow-up has to be, does this set us up for another attack of a different kind, perhaps a cyber attack?
Well, I don't think there's any question that we have to worry today about the potential of a cyber attack and the ability to use a computer in order to deploy a virus that can virtually cripple this country is one of the most serious threats we're confronting in the 21st century.
I mean, it's just extraordinary to me. I mean, look, sir, you ran the CIA, you ran the Defense Department. How is it possible that we cannot access this kind of information without Apple coming up with a whole new code that makes us vulnerable?
Well, from my experience, frankly, we always had the cooperation of those involved in the communications business. They worked with us, not against us, and we were able to develop a relationship of trust. And I think that's what needs to be done again, is to restore a relationship of trust where both sides can be able to work with one another to develop the right approach here. I'm convinced it can happen. I've seen it happen. I've also, by the way, seen the importance of getting that kind of information to preventing attacks in this country. And for that reason, there has got to be a way to get this done.
So what do you think changed? I mean, when you were in charge, you were working successfully with private practice, with companies or whomever, to actually provide the right information that you in government needed. What changed? Was it Edward Snowden, that Edward Snowden released all of this information, allowing the public to know that there was, in fact, Big Brother watching, and now they don't want to be held accountable? Is that what changed?
I think there's several things that changed. One is Snowden's revelations and the amount of attention on what information was being made available to the government in these cases. So that's one thing. Two, time has passed since 9/11 and what happened on 9/11. And I think memories have faded, and we haven't paid attention to the potential of a serious attack on this country. And so for that reason, the very inspiration for making sure that we have that kind of information has faded. That, too, has contributed to it. And then thirdly, I think there are probably personality problems involved here between those that were speaking on behalf of the government and those that were speaking on behalf of the industry, that for some reason they sat down, tried to resolve this, and could not have the kind of discussion that needed to take place in order to find a resolution. So I think all of those factors are involved here, which isn't to say that we should just sit back and wait for the courts to decide this. I think it's more important right now for the administration and Apple to figure out a way to get this done.
Yeah. All right. Well, final question on this topic, because I want to move on. But what kind of legislation, if legislation, would you look for from Congress to get this moving?
Well, the problem we're dealing with right now, Maria, is you've got a dysfunctional Congress that's having a hard time getting anything passed because of the partisanship and the gridlock that's taking place in Washington. But when it comes to national security, you would hope that both Republicans and Democrats could sit down and develop an approach that would provide for the kind of protection through the courts, through the executive branch, through our judicial system that would protect our privacy and yet allow us to get the information we need. I really think that's possible, but it's up to the Congress to sit down and try to work this through. The problem right now is that we've got a real problem in the Congress trying to resolve any issue, much less one related to national security.
Yeah, because you must agree that there is a slippery slope here, right? I mean, if, as Apple has said, look, if we do create such a code, that will enable some people to be able to see all of your data without you knowing it, turn on your microphone, your phone without you knowing it, access to your health care information, etc. It's a slippery slope, isn't it?
Look, I understand their concerns, and they've obviously developed encryption to try to protect that kind of privacy. But if law enforcement could present to a court the kind of evidence that indicates they're dealing with a terrorist who is in the process of trying to develop an attack on this country, makes that case to the court provides an order to be able to get into that kind of information, there has got to be a way to provide that information without sacrificing the codes belonging to Apple.